Good afternoon or good morning to all of you, regardless of where you are in the United States, which I think everyone is where everyone is, at least as of this moment. Glad that you're here. And we're going to talk about getting better results for our learning efforts in our organizations, regardless of our training budgets. And here's what I'm guessing. Well, I'll more about that in a second. When I'm building these webinars, I always, my first thing is, what am I trying to accomplish? But then, who is going to be here? And I always have to make some guesses. Let me tell you how I guessed who was here. I believe that all of you, and some of you told me in the chat what your role is, but that I believe that you are here. You're in HROD training or line management in some sort. Your job title is probably something along the lines of some of those there. And ultimately, regardless of what your job title is, I'm confident that you care about the success and effectiveness of your organization and know that people building skills is a big contributor to that success. Like, I believe that, or you wouldn't have been attracted to the description of this webinar. And so it's from that perspective that I'm building this conversation. And beyond that, I know since I included the words training budget in this webinar, here's what I also know, or what I'm also presuming. Some of you have more budget than others. And some of you, even if you have a budget, like, we'd like to figure out how to use it more effectively. So whether you've got a budget, don't have much of a budget, doesn't matter. This session is designed to help you, as long as this is true for you, that you care about the success of your organization and you know that building skills of our folks helps us get there. If you don't know me, here's just a little bit about me. My name is Kevin Eikenberry. I'm the Chief Potential Officer of the Kevin Eikenberry Group. Written a bunch of books, done a bunch of stuff, worked with a bunch of leaders from around the world. Most importantly, perhaps today, I lead a team every day. I'm based in Indianapolis. My team is spread out across the country. A couple of them are on this call. One of them is down the hall, but most everyone works from their home from across the United States, across 3 time zones. And I'm super excited to be their leader. And I'm super excited to share with you today some ideas about how you can get better learning results in your organization, sort of regardless of what your budget looks like. If you don't know me, a couple things about me as we get ready to get started. Some nice things people have said about me in the past. I think the big point here is that because I've been working with leaders and because I've been working with organizations for a very long time, hopefully I bring a perspective that's useful to you and your organization. And perhaps that out of this conversation, you will want others to hear what I've shared, and that will be available to you later to share with them. So where are we headed for our time together? 4 big things that we're going to work on. We're going to talk about connecting how we learn to the way training happens in your organization. And we're going to connect learning to real world application. Those sound like pretty good ideas. And we're going to talk about e-learning and how it might or might not relate to all that. And lastly, how all of that and what you can be doing to support organizational learning outcomes through the work that you're doing. And I also know one other thing about you. Some of you will want the slides. So if you do want the slides, this is how you can get them. Send an email to info@kevineikenberry.com and we will get the slides to you. As I said, and Marlene put it in the chat there. Thank you, Marlene. And as I said, you will have access to the recording. You may not want it for you, but you may very well want it for others in your organization to share with them. And that would be what I would hope that you would do, because perhaps you're not the sole decision maker, perhaps that you want to share some of these insights with others. Maybe you're in line with what I'm talking about. I want to get some others in alignment with that as well. So a number of you were here at the actual beginning, or actually before I started, when I asked people to open up the chat and tell us where you were from. If you missed that, please open up the chat, because I'm going to put you to work here right now. Here's the question. The question is, why do organizations need skill development? Like, what are the business reasons why your organization needs to have folks continuing to get better? We could use the word training if you want, but why does it matter to our organizations? And I'm curious, I want to hear what you all think right now. So Mike says it drives performance. There's advancements in technology, so we need to do that. We have to keep up with technology, increasing productivity. Business needs to, we need to you guys are going faster than I can say them in real time. So that's awesome. Um, uh, Whoops, it builds better culture, which is great. Developing leaders, high performance, provide quality services. Business need to develop and grow. So we start with people, James says. Skills are needed. The skills needed are constantly changing. Irvin says we want to grow productivity. So a lot about the fact that the world is changing, a lot about the fact that we have to provide quality services, and that's important. Lisa is talking about succession planning and investing in the growth of our staff at all levels. Heather is making a really important point about retention, which is critical. So often it's one of the things that we aren't thinking about as to why we're not developing our folks, and we wonder why they're leaving. Um, Laura says people want to learn new skills, and Adesh says upskilling professionals as technology changes. So a lot of stuff you're describing as, hey, the world's changing, technology's changing, so our people need to have the skills they need. And if we're not giving them the skills they need, they may not stay. And oh, by the way, we need those skills to keep people and to build succession plans and to provide great customer service. The point of all of this, and I'm not saying something that you don't already know, is that this is a business imperative, not a nice to do. And some of you are saying, well, Kevin, I get that, but the rest of the folks in my organization don't necessarily. But what I would say to you is you need to help make that connection for people. Things that were so easily coming off of your fingers onto the keyboard are exactly the right points to make. We're not doing this just because. We're doing this because it helps solve business problems, overcome business challenges, set us up to succeed in the future. It's a really, really important point, and I thought we ought to start there. If we're all on board with this, we need to think about why that matters to us organizationally. Because I'm guessing that if you're here, you already buy into that, right? And maybe one of the things that I can provide to you today is some encouragement, reinforcement, and some maybe ammunition to help you sell that to others in your organization. Now, I've been using the word skill development and learning, but the webinar title has the T word in it, or training. So I'm going to tell you that from now on, I'm not going to use the word training. And here's why: because training does not exactly equal learning. I'm not saying that training can't be effective, an important part of what we do, but what I'm saying is that training alone by itself is not the same as learning. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that in the next few minutes. It's a really important thing to disconnect. And again, I've been delivering training for in a variety of ways for 35 years, 40 years, and it's a valuable tool. It's not the same as learning. And for many people in your organization, they love to learn, but don't necessarily love training. So we got to think about how we can decouple that in a way that can help us get better results and get better acceptance of what we're going to do. And in fact, even rethink how we're going to do it. So what I thought I'd do is step back and talk a little bit about what we know about adult learning. And the stuff I'm about to share is not new, but it's worth us revisiting and thinking about because it sets the stage for everything else we're going to talk about today. And so the 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 principles, if you will, of adult learning go a little bit like this. People want to learn when they have relevance, when they have an answer to why does this matter to me? When it matters to me, I'm much more interested in learning it, right? Giving people the why. You may have heard of something called the WIFM. Ultimately, what's in it for me? Ultimately, people need to see relevance, no interest. The most effective learning will build on what people already know rather than being this island of new stuff over here. When you think about the best facilitators of learning, one of the things that you'll notice about them is they're always helping people connect the new stuff to what's already known. And so when we can help people build on their experience, which helps with their confidence, but also helps them connect the dots to the new learning, that when we can use that fact, when we're creating learning, we have a better chance of success. So learning that's relevant, that builds on people's experience, that people have ownership of, that they feel like this is something that's mine, and because ultimately learning is very personal. And so if we can help people create a sense of ownership, have ownership of it, not have it be something being done to them, but being something done for them, and because of what their interests and needs are, it makes a big difference. And ultimately, especially as adults, we see learning as a way to solve problems. So I could say, it would be really interesting for me to learn French. But if I were getting ready to go to France, I would have a problem now. I mean, unless I want to use the fancy translating thing on my phone, I need to learn some phrases in French to be successful when I go to Paris. And so then suddenly I have both a problem to solve, and I see learning as a way to solve my problem, and it's relevant to me. And when all of those things go together, then people get really interested and in tune with learning something. When the learning is relevant to them and helps them solve a problem as they see it, the learning effectiveness goes way up. And all of this comes back to the idea that learning, again, is something that's internally motivated. Yes, we can create learning moments and learning events and learning processes that hopefully take advantage of these bullet points, but ultimately it's the other person that's going to decide. Okay. So these are sort of things that we've known about adult learners for a long time. And I think it's useful for us to step back to those because sometimes we forget the foundational stuff that helps us be more successful. And so notice that none of these things say training program. And I just wanted to note that, but I wanted to go beyond that and say that while mostly what we do when we're thinking about building skills, and in fact, I've used that word already several times, skill development, is we focus on the skill set, building the skill set that people need. We're trying to build a learning path so people have the skill set that they need. But if you look back at this list, what you will find is that there's not nearly as much here about the skill until something else is right first, and that's the mindset. Once people see why. Once people see value, once people see that and have that mindset that matches the skills, you see, you got really smart folks and they can learn skills, but they're only going to be useful to them if the mindset matches the skill set. And the other problem with what we've typically done in the workplace is we've focused on skill set and not spent enough time on what we call habit set, or making the learning go to work in the real world. Okay. So I want to go back to sort of two big ways that we might have thought about learning when we were kids, or if you have children, you might be thinking about this with your kids. Here in Central Indiana, some of the schools are starting tomorrow, so it's back to school time, and if wherever you live, it's back to school time soon. So whether you have kids or you're thinking back to when they were in school or when you were in school, there's a couple of things that are worth us thinking about. Like we learned in class. In fact, that's the first thing you thought of when you thought of this. You thought I was going to talk about a classroom. But some of us also learned something like piano, right? So actually, and there are lessons for us in both of these. And the lessons I want to talk about more today are about the one on the right, not the one on the left. So I'm going to actually ask this question in the chat. If you ever took piano lessons, or if you had your children in piano lessons, I'm curious, what are some of the pieces of that process? Like, how did they learn, or how did you learn how to play? I'm curious. In the chat, tell me, what are the things about it that helped it work or not, where people could actually know where to put the fingers on the keys, make things happen, and make music happen. Anybody have any experience? Erica says watching and observing others. Okay, Madison wants to know because she never learned. Okay, it's never too late, Madison. Lessons and lots of practice, repetition, lots of practice. Nisi says, I followed along with YouTube videos. That's the new world, right? More on that in a bit. Uh, Getting a student excited by watching an expert, which is really a huge piece as it relates to this mindset idea, right? Watching, hearing, learning the language of sheet music, practice keeps showing up, listening to hours of not so good practice, then being proud of a great recital or performance. Irvin, I think, is talking about him as a parent, not as a participant. Have a good teacher, practice keeps showing up, being motivated keeps showing up, really important. Having fun with it, being allowed to fail. Uh, like you can't get there without failing, right? Lessons, scales and ear training, what sounds right, on and on. This is something I did not know, Wayne. 5 years of accordion. I remember nothing except girl. You picked the wrong instrument, Wayne. You picked the wrong instrument. But let me just say a little bit more about this to coalesce some of the things you shared and add a few more thoughts. I didn't notice any of you saying that you went to or you sent someone to the 3-day piano workshop for them to return being able to play the piano. They didn't go to the week-long conference. They didn't go to the 1-day workshop. They didn't take a 2-hour session. They, when we learned how to play, we, number one, expected it to take time. Like it's going to take time. We know it's going to take time, and it's a little bit at a time, right? We don't learn it in big chunks. We learn it a little at a time. We know it's going to take time. We start with easier stuff and work up. We don't start with Beethoven, right? And as many of you mentioned, we don't do it alone. And as nearly all of you mentioned, there's practice. And as Irvin mentioned, it's not just practice, it's go out and use it in the recital. Now, all of those things are true for piano, but I'm not talking about piano. Now, piano or accordion, Wayne, is a complex set of skills, right? And we can't learn it in a day. There's not a single key to master key to having it all figured out. And if we think about human skills, if we think about leadership skills, if we think about any of the kinds of skills that brought you here today, you would say, man, those skills are at least as complex as playing the piano. And so why aren't we thinking about them more like this than the ways that maybe it shows up in our workplaces? And yes, if you sent someone to piano lessons, there was a coach, but a lot of the investment wasn't in the training. The investment was in the time and effort of the learner. Right? So the first thing I want to say as we think about your training budget is to say that if you really want the learning to happen, if you really want skill development to happen, it isn't just about the dollars that you spend to invest in whatever the thing is that you're investing in, right? Because ultimately, what I would say to you is that real learning in the real world isn't an event. And especially for the kinds of skills that you all are thinking about as you show up. I mean, I can tell by listening to your reading your answers to the earlier question. Like real learning in the real world isn't an event, and real learning in the real world is what you're here to talk about, is what you want your folks to get. It's all those organizational benefits that you were describing earlier. They come because we want real learning in the real world. So let's then take what we know about learning or maybe have been reminded of and connect it to work. Shall we? Let's do that. Before I do that, though, questions, comments, other observations that you make Anything else you want to say about the whole piano thing, or anything at all before we continue? Anybody? Comments, questions? Anything? All right. So let's connect this learning stuff, if you will, to work. So we got a comment here. Let me scroll down here. Brenda says, I like the redirect from training to learning. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the word training. I'm saying it's not the whole picture. Like training is a part of how we can make learning happen, right? But if you go back, just back here, you can see that there's more to it than just the training with the instructor, right? And again, I think we could argue that most anything that we want to teach people in the workplace, really want to build skills to change organization results, are the kinds of things that are at least as complex, different, but at least as complex as playing the piano. So, and in fact, the piano, at least the keys are always in the same place. We're talking about leading people, the keys are moving at the same time, right? So let's talk about connecting learning to work. The first thing, let's remember three of those points that I made earlier about adult learning, and that is learning will be most effective when it's relevant, when the learner has ownership and is realizing they're trying to solve a problem, and that learning will help them solve the problem. So that's table stakes for people to say, I'm in to want to learn this stuff, which means that before we get to anything else, the first thing that has to be true is that there has to be clear expectations of the work output. Right? Like, let me just give you an example of something that I'm guessing most of you would recognize. Most of you would recognize this scenario. There's a person in your organization, maybe that works for you, or someone who is a true subject matter expert. Like they know the job, they know the job, they do the work well, they have technical expertise. That's awesome. And yet, if you're their leader, you're thinking, man, I love that they have all those things, but there's some other things I wish they would do too. But that person believes that their entire job is to be that, have that subject matter expertise and nothing else about how they interact with others or how they might help others or collaborate with others or 100 other things. If they don't see that as part of their job, if they see their job in this box, then that's how they're going to operate. Do they have any interest? Do they see any relevance in learning anything new? Do they have a problem to be solved? Not from their perspective. So people must understand what the clear job expectations are. And it relates to a lot of the things you guys said earlier, like the work is changing because the world is changing. The technology is changing the work. And so are the expectations of what we want and need, what the organization requires of folks, clear? If it's not clear, if people don't understand or see that there's a gap between what I'm delivering and what the organization needs, they have no interest. Why would they? So, clear expectations about what we're really looking for, what success looks like, is critical. I believe 95% of people want to do great work 95% of the time. Great work is defined by what's expected. If people don't know what's expected or their belief about what's expected is not in alignment, then the chances of them having interest in learning goes down. And one of the things, once we can get past that, then you all have had the what I would call the aha moment, the discovery moment. So one of the things we want to try to help do is help people have that aha moment, that moment of discovery that says, yeah, that's useful to me. Because that's the moment when we all become more internally motivated to learn more about that thing. So how do we help create discovery moments, and how do we provide flexibility? Because guess what? Not everyone's in the same place. Not everyone needs exactly the same skills. Now, let's just back up and say we may want everyone to have this level of this skill, but not everyone's at the same starting point. Some people are down here, some people are up here, people are really close. So having the flexibility to help people get what they need when they need it, which means we have to think not about creating learning events, or our events need to be a part of a process. Our events need to be a part of a process. And so some of you may have heard me say, we used to have a thing up at a booth that we would go to, and it would say, training is an event, learning is a process. And that's true, and it's kind of related to the statement I made earlier, but it's not 100% accurate because that training event can be a part of an ongoing process. And that's why training is not a four-letter word. It's just not the whole answer to our learning challenges. Okay. So if we want to continue to think about connecting the learning to work, then we have to think about what does that look like in the workplace, right? So let's talk about some of those things right here. And I would say that if you look at the times that you've learned things valuable at work, oftentimes you either learned it from a peer or with a peer, or what you were reinforced, your success was reinforced through that. So if we want to create learning in the workplace, we need to think about how do we engage people together in it. And that could look like people that are further along helping others. That could look like two of us working on it together. Could look like any number of things. How do we create the engagement of individuals? Remember, relevance, ownership. So how do we thinking about how to create that level of engagement? And that will start when people recognize, and there's something I need to do my job that I'm not doing at this moment. And the more we can create interaction, the better. And of course, the value of coaching is incredible. We all know that. We don't, and I would even say, think about not just capital C coaching or formal coaching or even coaching with the boss, but again, that learning together. So it could be capital C coaching, internal or external. It could be small c coaching as well. And so for the purposes of this moment, I even don't even think about it as necessarily being anything more than people helping others, perhaps the leader, but maybe not, continue on the path of learning. And then how do we give people learning paths or approaches to move in the direction of meeting those expectations? And how do we help create those learning paths for everyone in the organization? And so when you think about these five things, here's what I want you to note about these five things. Very little of these five things require any budget. They require time and intention, but they don't require budget, right? They require designing things perhaps differently, or reinforcing things differently, or thinking about process differently, and not just about event, because often it's event is where the dollars are spent. And so hopefully you're already seeing, and I'm hoping you're connecting dots in your organization about how this connects better or differently for you. So before I continue, let me again stop and say, what questions do you have? Anybody have a question or a comment for me before I continue? So if you go back to where we started, and if you remember where we started, I mentioned e-learning. And so the question that you might be thinking, oh, how does he getting to this? And the question might be, where does e-learning fit? But before I answer this question, I want to ask a different question. I want you to know that what I want now, I want you to imagine that this is a safe place, that you can answer whatever comes to your mind. And so I would love to hear your thoughts when you hear that word e-learning. When you hear that word, what do you think? And what you think may be great, it may be less than great. I'm just curious. In the chat, tell me, when you hear e-learning, what do you think? It's a safe place to share. Accessible and self-directed, Brenda says. Okay. Mostly becomes compliance. I got to get through it. And yep, I can prove that I took it. Online training courses. Someone says it's also my job. Most people don't like them, mostly about compliance. Jason says, I'm gonna scroll back up here so I don't miss any of these. difficulty keeping employees engaged, but cost effective, Terry says. So there's a yes, but. Um, Madison says that's also my job. When I think about e-learning, I think about online training courses. Most people don't like them. Compliance keeps showing up. Self-paced, limited interaction. Most are boring. Can be both on demand or virtual instructor led. Could be those things. Laura says, I'm not a huge fan. And it sounds like a lot of you maybe aren't. People don't always pay attention and they do other things. The multitasking myth, right? Two categories: boring PowerPoint reads or exciting digital courses. Okay, can be great for those who are remote, but participation can be varied. Fits for some learning styles, some prefer it. It's not engaging. My mind wanders, lots of distractions. It does give us flexibility. Um, Wayne says, one of my first jobs, I took early e-learning, got the highest score in the class regularly, and got fired because I couldn't apply it. Uh, it's one thing to be able to test out the knowledge. It's a different thing to be able to apply it, right? Maybe there's no applicability. Click, 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 and get to the end. I love e-learning. Can't sit still during in-person learning. Erica, we've only got 30 more minutes. So some people say that test great. So here's what you're saying to me what I expected at some level to hear, and that is it's a mixed bag. So what I'd like to do is talk about how e-learning is helpful and how it's not, if I may. I'm going to use some metaphors to do this. And because what I believe is that everything that you just said can be true, both the positive and the negative. And so let's talk about this a little bit in terms of how it can be helpful and how it cannot be helpful next. And so, first of all, it's helpful. It can be helpful. Well, before I even get to the points on the slide, let me just say this. Let's acknowledge that there are some sorts of things, recurring safety training, some things we might need for compliance. It's a very useful thing for that. And hopefully we get people to be refreshed into all those things, and that's useful, right? But if we take that beyond that sort of use case and think about using it for lots of other kinds of skills, all the kinds of skills that you said organizationally that you want your organization wanted and needed earlier. If we can do that, that's how I want you to think about it from now on. Okay. So number one is it can be extremely helpful as an appetizer, right? If you think about eating, we get an appetizer and then we kind of get, oh, that's kind of useful. That tastes kind of good. I could use more of that. Or now it's satiated me a little, but I'm still hungry and I want more. So if we can think about e-learning as an appetizer, in other words, as a part of learning. That's great. You've been to a restaurant and someone orders the appetizers for everybody, or you say, hey, whatever everyone orders, then there are the appetizers. Like, so sometimes organizationally, we may want to use some e-learning in a very helpful way as an appetizer, or maybe if you think about it this way, that it's on the charcuterie board. And as a note, I actually spelled this right the first time without having to spell check, which I was kind of proud of. It's one of my better moments of the day when I finished this slide this morning. So on the charcuterie board, which means there's a bunch of stuff on there, and we can pick and choose the stuff that we want, that tastes good to us, that we're most interested in. Having e-learning on the charcuterie board, and there's a bunch of different stuff on there, can be a very useful way. There I am. I'm learning French. There you go. Exactly. So it can be useful that way. In other words, if we take the metaphor of learning as our diet, e-learning can be a very effective part of a balanced learning meal. Right. Terry says we use e-learning primarily for compliance and our competency learning related to our job descriptions for growth and our current roles within or with job aspirations. So yeah, so if I've got someone on my team, or if I could create learning paths for people that want to move in this direction, want to build these skills, want to move in these sorts of ways, it's going to be a really great piece of the meal. It isn't necessarily the whole meal, and in fact, it's not a meal replacement, right? Like A lot of mornings. On the mornings in my normal routine, I drink a protein shake. There's nothing wrong with that, I guess. But really, it would be better as a part of my day, not a true meal replacement. And too often, that's what we're doing. We need to give people something, so all we do is give them this as a replacement, or we treat it like the full meal. And that's not really where it best serves our folks or our organization for all of the reasons you shared earlier. It's incredibly useful. It's a part of the menu. It's not the full meal. It applies to better for some people than others based on learning style, personal interest, and all of those things. I will say that if we've done a good job of building relevance and people see that value in it, it will be more valuable than if that hasn't been done. All of the things we talked about earlier, if those things are in place for our learners, it will be more valuable than it would be otherwise. And the other way that it's not helpful is it's not a Chinese takeout menu, which is often what I see it being. We have all of these e-learning courses available to you. Use whichever ones you want, which sounds awesome, except you don't know where to start. And you don't have any guidance or help about what to do, what to pick, how to pick, etc. So I hope that you leave thinking about e-learning as an incredibly useful tool for learning in your organization, but not being a meal replacement, the full meal, and that sort of thing. Okay. So then how do we make e-learning work in the context? Notice that this doesn't say e-training. It says e-learning. So if we want to connect it to all the stuff we were talking about earlier in terms of learning, then let's talk about how we do that. So the first thing, and I think a part of what I hear in Terry's point is um, to related to job descriptions for growth within current role or aspirations. And that relates to both, as I hear what Terry's typing there, that e-learning is most effective when it's connected to both personal and organizational goals. That's what I'm reading, Terry. I hope that's close. And that's exactly right. Remember, when people see relevance for them, when they see relevance for them in the organization, awesome. Thank you for that feedback. Um, when the connections are clear to the individual, e-learning has a much better chance of being successful in our organization than if it's not. Okay. So, stated another way, it's a part of the meal plan. It's not the whole thing. And so, here's where I know that people in this that are with me right now are in different spots in terms of your organizations. Some of your organizations, you already have some uh, training developed. You have some learning processes that you use that might be blended, where e-learning might be part, or where you might be able to use e-learning where you haven't thought in conjunction with the other stuff you're doing. And that's where this can be especially helpful as that appetizer. How can we use e-learning as an introduction, as the starting point to gain people's interest and awareness as a part of what you're doing in other ways, whatever those other ways in your organization might be? Virtual, in person, synchronous, asynchronous, learning groups. Like there could be all sorts of things that you're doing, and e-learning could sit on the front of that, curated effectively to help you make it more successful. It can also be used on the back end as reinforcement because we're talking about mindset, skill set, habit set. So e-learning can help us get the mindset right before people arrive for the rest of your process. It can also be used as reinforcement and repetition and helping people practice after, or again, as a part of an ongoing learning path, just not necessarily the whole thing. It can also be used to engage with others. So let's talk about organizations here. Say, Kevin, that all sounds great, but we're here because we don't have a lot of training budget. And so I'm suggesting, one of the things that some organizations will do is they'll take a book. This would be a good one to choose, and say, hey, we're going to have everybody read the book, and then we're going to have a conversation about it. We call it a book club. right? Well, that doesn't take a lot of training budget to do that, but it wouldn't and that's certainly a good strategy, whatever the book might be, but it doesn't have to be a whole book. It could be an e-learning course. It could be a couple of pieces of an e-learning course that leads to a conversation with others that is used in a way to say, hey, here's some e-learning. Now I want you to meet with a learning partner or a small group and talk about how you can apply those things in real life. And now what you're starting to do is think about it as a part of learning. Again, it's e-learning, not e-training. And so these are just a few of the ideas about how you can then transition this into using it in whatever it is that you're doing organizationally. And again, it doesn't have to. One of the things that someone said about e-learning earlier is it's cost effective. And it is. And when you start to hook it with other pieces, we start to reduce the concerns or frustrations that we've experienced or that our learners may have experienced with it. So you say, okay, so maybe we can think about how we could use e-learning as a part of what we're doing. That sounds cool, Kevin, but how do I pick it? Because there's lots of it. So I'm going to give you 4 things to do to help you select the e-learning, because there's lots of it out there, about how and what you might use to pick. So I've got 4 C's to help you think about selecting your e-learning, your partner, the courses, however you want to say that, right? First thing is what you pick needs to have a cultural match, right? Like you want to make sure that it matches the language that you use in your organization, that the direction that training is taking people in terms of skill building, in terms of leadership development, is a match with what you're trying to do in your organization. Because if the match isn't there, the effectiveness is going to go way down and confusion will abound. So make sure that when you're looking at options that you're considering the cultural match. The second thing is credibility. Is there credibility in the deliverers, the designers? Are you confident that what you're getting is high quality, that it's going to resonate, and all those sorts of things? Next, that it's curated. One of the biggest mistakes that organizations make, again, the Chinese menu, they got so many things to choose from, no one knows where to go. They don't know which one to use, which things to do, where to go, how to start. You know, the interesting thing about choice is, as human beings, we love and need choice. But if you give us too much choice, we become immobilized, right? So when organizations can help to curate it and point people with learning paths in a direction, then it can be much more effective. And then the last thing is it's got to be able to connect it to other stuff you're doing organizationally. So is it set up, is it designed in a way that will connect to the other stuff that you want to do, whether that's with other training stuff or whether that's we're using this standalone, but we're inserting it into a learning process, not just offering people or telling people or forcing people go take this e-learning. Okay. So that's 3 of the 4 things that I promised we were going to talk about. We've talked a little bit about how do we make learning work better in organizations? How do we connect it to organizational goals? We've talked a little bit about how e-learning might fit into that. But let's go back to our organizational learning goals. And I'm curious right now in the chat, what are some of the big learning goals in your organization right now? What are some of the big gaps that you see or that you're working on or that you're aware of? I'm just curious. I think it'll be interesting as we do this, how many of you will find that you're not alone. So feel free, if you would, to share what are your biggest organizational learning goals, biggest gaps, where are the things you're focusing on or where you feel like you need to be focusing on. Okay, Brenda says situational leadership, communication, leadership soft skills, adapting to change, and then of course tech, computer tech, workplace de-escalation skills, AI, okay, prioritizing performance, accountability, new supervisor stuff, driving change. We have SMEs, but they're not coaches, leadership in general, a lot of really good stuff. And so important stuff, things, all of those that take us back to where you started at the beginning, new leadership. So is that for new leaders, Rachel? I'm guessing that's probably what that means. How do we deal with this with Doge cuts? Okay. So it's worthwhile. So first of all, as you notice and listen to read what other people said there, and you tie it back to what you all said at the beginning about how skill development will help meet organizational needs, you can see the connections here, right? Michelle said adds wellness to that list. Thank you, Michelle. Okay. So let's talk about organizational learning and e-learning then. Like there's not like everything that you all just mentioned, I promise you, you can find e-learning around those areas, right? But now the question is, how do I connect learning and e-learning for our organization in an effective way? And the first thing I would say is, how can we use it to enhance what we're already doing? So for those of you that are doing some stuff, maybe it's not as much stuff as you'd like to do, or your budget's been cut or whatever, but you're doing something. How could you use e-learning to enhance what you're already doing? That's a useful question to consider. Another useful question to consider is how do we extend offerings to more people? Because it can be the foundation of something that's pretty cost effective. Again, I'm suggesting you don't just drop it out there, but you put other stuff around it as we've talked about. But you can use it as a way to extend offerings to more people, and you can perhaps expose people to new or different learning opportunities. So those are three ways, three things you could be thinking about how to connect these two important points. Taking us back to the beginning, recognizing how important organizational learning is to our organizational goals, and then saying, hey, we know that e-learning, while it has its challenges, many of those can be overcome and cost effective, right? So the question then becomes, how do we put all this together and how do we get there? Okay. Thank you, Madison. So the question is then, how do we get there? And I'm going to suggest to you, maybe not a surprise, but I'm going to suggest to you some of what we have put together as a way to connect those dots that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes. And so I want to introduce you to, if you're not aware, of what we call remarkable master classes. And so they were created and delivered by me. They are what you might call classic e-learning kinds of stuff. They are put then on your LMS, and like most e-learning kinds of things, they have bite-sized short lessons. This is not long. This is not long things. These are short pieces, and we have built them in 13 learning areas. And based on all of the stuff I've said in the first 45 minutes, I'm going to suggest that you don't even have to think about them as I'm going to ask all of my people to take all of this whole module, this whole learning area. But rather, there may be pieces in that I want them to take that's connected to something else we're doing, or there's two or three of those 5-minute things that I want several people to watch and then have a group conversation about them. So we can create learning processes that don't cost us a lot of money, but still get us better learning results because we're putting all of this learning, how we learn stuff back together, just using e-learning as a part, an impetus for that, or a foundation for that. And all of these are consistent in approach in terms of uh, what we believe and what we share and how we share it. So you're going to get consistency across these 13 things. Nisi says, are they SCORM compliant? Yes, they are. So you can do all the stuff that you may want to do from an LMS perspective in terms of tracking and all that stuff. That's all possible. You can learn more by going to kevineikenberry.com/masterclass. But so now you're saying, okay, Kevin, but what are they? What are the topics? Let's talk about that. So I want to, and there's the link. Thank you, Marlene. So first of all, if you look at this first part of the list, you're going to see, oh, those are some pretty solid foundational leadership skill stuff. A number of you said, hey, one of our gaps are new leaders, leadership skills, those sorts of things. So leaders at lots of levels need to get better at micromanagement or avoiding micromanagement, of delegating intentionally, of leading change. That was identified by several of you very specifically. Giving feedback successfully, critical part of coaching. But notice this doesn't say coaching. It's a piece of coaching that's there. Influencing powerfully is a piece of leadership. It's a piece of coaching. It's a piece of communication, if you will. And then we move into some things. Accountability was mentioned, creating a culture of accountability. How do we infuse more accountability into our organization? That's one of these learning areas. Again, was mentioned by some of you in the chat. Helping leaders become a talent magnet. One of the things we hear a lot is organizations saying, hey, we're having a hard time keeping our folks, retaining our folks, or attracting the right talent to our team. Building effective hybrid teams. That's certainly in the zeitgeist of the world of thinking today. And many of us are dealing with that. And many of our leaders aren't as prepared to do that successfully as we'd like. Just because they've been doing it for 5 years doesn't mean they're doing it well. And then we've got one on confidence. And then the others over here, you'll see a little bit of a shift. Uh, they start to shift as you get to confidence. And then the rest of these on the others are more broadly, not just for leaders, but for any of our folks, nurturing working relationships. How do we do that in person and virtually? Integrating learning into daily life. How do we help people become continual learners at work? What are the skills? How do they do that in the real world? We have one on that. We have one on the mindsets that create greater results, and then one on productivity, getting more of the right things done. So there are 13 there. And there's one that's coming based on this book that I flashed in front of you. If you're not familiar with my latest book, Flexible Leadership, there's one coming on becoming a flexible leader. And the question might become, we could have a conversation with us about this later, is what else do you need? And there are other areas where we have IP and experience that we would be able to or be willing to create them for you. And if we felt they had broader implication, creating those in a way that you could get an even better deal if we know that we can then offer them to others afterwards. So my point is there's lots of other ways that we might be able to help. So there are the areas we have. We don't have 732 items, right? We got 13, soon to be 14 of these that if they're a match for you might be of great value to you. And what you get is our coaching and help to help you integrate those in to what you're doing, like I've been talking about for the last little while, right? So you're saying, okay, Kevin, you said the word budget in the title. So are you going to talk about that? So as you probably are aware, if you've ever bought any kind of e-learning product, that what it costs depends a lot on how many of them how many learners you have. And so that's certainly the case for us. So if you want to buy one of the learning areas, that's going to cost between $39.50 and $79 per learner. Obviously, the more learners, the lower the number per person. If you pick 5 of those areas, the prices there are, as you can see, $175 to $350 per learner. And if you want to buy them all, and we'll right now include the 14th one, Flexible Leader, in that, if you would say, hey, we want all of them for some of our folks, great. Now, let me just be honest. I would love to sell you all of them. But based on everything we've set up until now, that might not be where you should start. And we want to help you get real learning results. And that isn't necessarily meaning that you should just randomly or sort of automatically buy all 13. If you want to do that, if we can help you think that through, and we'd be happy to do that. But maybe, hey, we need 6 of them now. We need 2 of them. We need 5 of them. We need 11 of them. We don't need all 13. That doesn't apply to us. Fine, we can work out for you pricing for any number of them based on what your needs are. And as you can see, if you do the quick math, the more of them you buy, the more we will discount it. Not only the more learners for any one, but the more of the learning areas or learning paths you pick, the more we will reduce the price per. So we're happy to work with you on all of that to make that all happen. Now, I want to take us back to the beginning. I want to leave this, go back to where we started, and say, if you came here because you want to help build skills of the folks in your organization, then some of you may have seen this framework from us before. This is how we think about it. Like you can build something yourself, you can buy something from someone else, you can partner with someone, you can collaborate more deeply with someone, or you can do some combination of that. So whatever you're doing to help make learning happen, you can pick from one of these 5 sorts of ways. How are we going to do that? So the question then is, how could we help you based on where you might be here? Well, the first thing is, if you want to build it, you just got 55 minutes of content to help you think about it. And you may say, hey, I got what we need. We don't need you, Kevin. Awesome. You got some stuff that you can go use to build. Maybe you say, hey, we need some stuff to get started. So we don't have a lot of budget, but we know that if we do it intelligently and put some stuff with it, we can still get great learning results. Then maybe what you want to do is start with remarkable master classes, or maybe you've got some learning and development stuff happening and you think this could integrate or dovetail in. That would look more like partnering, where you could incorporate some of that. Or maybe you're saying, no, Kevin, we could you help us do something very specifically on this? And the answer could be yes. And if so, then we could work with you to create a masterclass either for you or that we could do generally and give you an even better deal, because that would be covering some of the development costs. So happy to work with you on that. And then of course, maybe there's a combination of those things. So ultimately, you came here to say, hey, how do we get more learning to happen in an organization, even if we don't have a lot of money? So your choices are one of those five things. And we can help you in any of those sorts of ways unless you pick A. But there's another one that I know is true. You may say all those sound great, but the reality is you might choose to do nothing. And recognize, if you don't do something else, you're choosing F. And you may say, well, Kevin, I'm not the only decision maker. Let us know how we can help you help those decision makers. That could be using this recording, this webinar to help you. That could be getting us on the phone with some of them or in a Zoom call with some of them. We're happy to help in those ways. Your salesperson, your contact on our team will be reaching out. You'll know how you can reach out to them if that's what you want to do. We're happy to help in those sorts of ways. Okay. So the question I would honestly say is, if you know you've got gaps that are needed of skills that will help solve an organizational problem, the question is, why would you wait? Because your learning needs are still here. The organization results still matter. People are not going to learn it in a vacuum. Like, you don't give them something, and it's going to happen. And if you can give them some options and resources that are budget friendly, why not? And so if you're that person that has that ability to make some of those calls, we'd love to chat about it. And if you're a person that's saying, I'd like to help move this ball forward in our organization, let us know how we can help you do that too. Obviously, we'd like to partner with you to help provide some of our remarkable master classes to help the leaders and employees in your organization. Even if that's not the right fit for you right now, I hope that you will take the ideas from this webinar to help still create the learning you need in your organization. Maybe we're not the right cultural fit. Maybe we don't have quite the right content for your needs. If that's the case, and you still go use these things to make real progress for your organization, then we've done what we came here to do. And we hope that we can help you, but we hope that this has helped you. It's been a pleasure to have you here, and I'm going to stay for just a second. If anyone's got any questions, otherwise, I will see you all soon. Thank you all so much for being here, and I'm going to stop the recording now.